Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are cracking open the science of how we actually learn. We're going to dive into some of the big ideas from the book Make It Stick to figure out, why we forget so much and, more importantly, how we can make knowledge last.
So let's kick things off with a question that, let's be honest, probably hits a little too close to home. You've been there, right? You pull an all-nighter, you highlight every single page, you feel like you've got it down cold. But then the test comes, and poof, it's just gone. Why on earth does that keep happening?
Well, the root of the problem is this really powerful cognitive illusion. See, we fall into what the authors call the familiarity trap. When information starts to feel easy and familiar, like when you're rereading your notes for the 10th time, your brain makes a huge mistake. It confuses that feeling of fluency for actual solid knowledge. And that's exactly what this section is all about, the fluency trap. It turns out the very study habits we swear by are often the least effective. They create this illusion of mastery that's, frankly, as fragile as a house of cards. I mean, just think about our go-to strategies, rereading everything, and, of course, cramming. They feel super productive, don't they? But that feeling of ease? That's actually a massive warning sign. All it does is build this fragile, short-term confidence that just shatters under pressure and leads straight to forgetting. Okay, so if our usual habits are basically a trap, what's the alternative? Well, it all starts with a complete change in focus. You've got to stop trying to just shovel information in and start practicing how to pull it out. And that is called retrieval practice. This isn't about rereading, not at all. It's about closing the book and asking yourself, okay, what do I actually know? Just the simple act of trying to remember something is what builds and strengthens the neural pathways in your brain. This quote from a professional actor just nails it. That feeling of struggle, when you have to really reach for a memory, that is not a sign that you're failing. It's the sign that you're actually learning. The effort is what makes the memory stick. And this isn't just some academic theory. Think about the high-stakes world of neurosurgery. A surgeon in the middle of a crisis doesn't have time to look things up. By constantly retrieving the critical steps over and over, that knowledge literally transforms from a conscious thought into a life-saving reflex. That's the real power of retrieval practice. All right, let's move on to our next couple of strategies. These are all about how you structure your practice. Because it turns out it's not just what you do, but when and in what order you do it that matters. A lot. First up is the idea of spacing. Instead of that 1 8-hour marathon study session, you are so much better off doing 4 2-hour sessions spread out over a week. So why does this work? Well, spacing lets a little bit of forgetting happen. And that forces you to work harder to retrieve the information later, which, you guessed it, makes the memory way stronger. And the stakes here can be incredibly high. Get this. In a really fascinating study on surgical residents, 16% of those who crammed all their training into a single day couldn't complete their surgeries. They actually damaged their subjects' vessels beyond repair. The group that spaced out their training, they performed way better on every single measure. Now, right alongside spacing, we've got something called interleaving. You see, most of us use what's called blocked practice. We try to master Chapter 1 before we even look at Chapter 2. Interleaving says, nope, mix it all up. Study a little of topic A, then a little of B, then C, and then circle back around again. So why on earth is this so much more effective? Well, imagine you're trying to learn to identify artists' styles. If you look at 10 Monet paintings in a row, it's pretty simple. But if you mix in some Monet and some Renoir, you force your brain to work way harder. You have to spot the subtle differences that define each style. That struggle is what builds a deeper, more flexible understanding that you can then apply to paintings you've never even seen before. Okay, so we've covered how to retrieve information and how to structure that retrieval. Our next strategy is all about making that information truly meaningful in the first place. This is called elaboration. Basically, it's the process of taking new knowledge and actively connecting it to stuff you already know. The more connections you can build, the more mental hooks you create for yourself, the easier it's going to be to find that information later on. And one of the absolute best ways to do this is through simple, concrete analogies. To understand an abstract principle like conduction, you don't need some complex diagram. Just connect it to an experience you already get, that feeling of warmth spreading into your cold hands from a hot mug. Here's another great one. Angular momentum. That's a pretty tricky physics concept, right? But the second you link it to that powerful image of a figure skater pulling in their arms to spin faster, suddenly that abstract idea becomes concrete, it becomes visual, and it becomes totally unforgettable. So what do all these things, retrievals, spacing, elaboration, what do they all have in common? They're not easy. They all require real effort. And that brings us to the most important mental shift of all. We have to completely let go of this idea that learning should feel easy. In fact, it's the total opposite. The strategies that feel difficult in the moment, those are the ones that create the most durable, long-term learning. Researchers have a great name for them: desirable difficulties.
And this is just perfectly illustrated by how paratroopers train. You don't just jump out of a plane on day one. The whole process is broken down into these manageable, desirably difficult steps. You start by learning how to fall in a gravel pit. Then you move to a tiny platform, then a bigger tower. Each step systematically builds the skills piece by piece so that final, high-stakes jump feels manageable. And the learning is just deeply ingrained.
So, what does your new learning toolkit look like? Well, first, test yourself. Practice active retrieval instead of just rereading. Second, ditch the cramming and space out your practice. Third, stop studying in blocks and start mixing things up. And finally, always, always be looking for ways to connect new information to what you already know. So the question I want to leave you with is this: what is one thing you are going to change about how you learn? How are you going to trade that comfortable illusion of fluency for the effortful, effective strategies that actually make it stick?